We now call this meeting to order. If we could please rise if you're able and pay attention to Councilman Lesser for the invocation to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to ask Mr. Curtis Pitts, the chairman of Faith and Hard Works Ministry, to come and give us our invocation this evening.
We'd all bow our heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together. God, we ask that you bless our city, our state, and our nation, Father. We ask that you show us the commonality of our needs and our desires, Father. We ask you to bless those who are out in the cold. God, we ask that you touch those that are in power and in leadership, God. We ask you to go beyond parties, beyond communities, Father, beyond race, and lift us up so that we can become and continue to be, God, the greatest nation, the greatest city, and the greatest state. We pray these things, and for the blessing of your Son, Jesus, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We now proceed to presentations. The first one is the only one is a presentation from the Utilities Citizens Academy City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Governing body, tonight we're going to present information about a new initiative that's been started by the Utilities Department. And Utilities Director Bob Sample, please come forward and present.
8 minutes.
Well, good evening. I understand that expectations. I'll try to comply, but it's I'm going to talk with you tonight about something I'm really excited about, so I'll really have to control myself. But I'm going to present something new that's going to happen in utilities, and I probably ought to get the... So I thought I'd start out by giving you just a little bit of history. Back in April of 2018, we hosted the Wichita State Work in Water Experience. This is a program that's put on by Wichita State that brings local students in and teaches them about water management, and as well as the professions that go along with managing water. And so that really inspired us to come up with a program where we could interact with our citizens, but also educate the public on the utilities department. So what we came up with, and I'm pleased to announce, is the very first Topeka Utilities Academy. It's going to take place on February 16th, and I can tell you that not knowing what kind of response we would get, within 24 hours we filled the class. We actually overfilled the class, and so now that's prompted us to start putting together a second academy later on in the year. So just a little bit about the Utilities Academy. We're going to meet on Saturday mornings for 4 consecutive weeks, and we're going to cover all aspects of utilities department, including the water, wastewater, and the stormwater utilities. First week, we're going to do an overview of the Topeka Utilities Department, and we're going to talk about what it means when we say that the utilities department's made up of an enterprise funds. And we're also going to talk about the $2.8 billion worth of assets that we manage and our asset management plan to replace that aging infrastructure. But then we're going to get into some of the water basics, like, for instance, watersheds, the Kansas River, and things like that. So week 2, then we're going to focus on water utility systems. So we're going to explain how we take water from the river, turn it into drinking water, and then explain how we distribute water throughout our community. And then we're also going to hit on customer service, our customer service and call center. Week 3 is we're going to focus on water pollution control systems. So we're going to talk about how we collect the wastewater from throughout the city of Topeka how we transport it to one of our wastewater treatment plants, and then how we actually treat that water before we discharge it back into the river, and the reasons why that is important. We'll also cover our stormwater program and how important it is to properly manage stormwater. Week 4, we're taking it to the streets. So we've partnered with Topeka Metro, and we're heading out into the field. We're going to tour some facilities, and we're also going to have some demonstrations so folks can learn what utility staff does on a daily basis. So as we go through the class, we'll be using a classroom discussion. We'll also be using tours and also hands-on activities to get to learn all about utilities department. So we're excited about this. I wanted you just to have a little taste of what's coming. And that's kind of the end of my presentation. I think I hit the 8-minute mark.
You sure did, sir.
Yeah.
At this point in time, do we have any questions for Mr. Sample? Councilman Lesser.
How long are the classes?
They'll last from 3 to 4 hours on Saturday morning. We'll start at 8 o'clock and be out of there by noon. We'll start at the water plant for the first session. We'll also move over to the water pollution control division and at the Oakland wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
So we'll move around a little bit, especially as we do the tours.
Cool. Thanks.
Councilman Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Sample. Just curious, is this all in-house training, or are they all city employees, or do you have visiting attendees as well?
You mean
For the
teaching?
academy?
Teaching the class or those attending?
Either way?
The folks that are attending are all citizens, and the folks teaching the class are all utility department employees. So we'll be using those subject matter experts when we start getting specific with the different areas. And it's one of those things that I'm really finding motivating for our staff, because they love to talk about the services they provide for the city of Topeka. So I
That's
think there's
good.
benefit on our end, and it'll also be a good educational program.
Good to see that. Maybe we can replicate it in other departments as well.
Councilman Jensen.
Thank you. I think this is fantastic. I'm curious if it's possible to record these and put them on YouTube so other people that can't attend the classes could then watch them.
That's a good question. I don't know why not. I'll certainly check into that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good luck.
Okay. Yeah,
Seeing no questions, thank you so much for your presentation.
thank you.
We now proceed with the roll call.
Mayor De La Isla.
Here.
Council members Hiller.
Here.
Clear. Here. Ortiz.
Here.
Emerson.
Here.
Padilla.
Present.
Jensen.
Present.
Mays.
Here.
Cohen.
Here.
And Lester.
Here.
We move on to the appointments that the clerk would read.
A is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Marie Carter to the City of Topeka Americans with Disabilities Act Advisory Council for an unexpired term ending February 21, 2021. B is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Kim Montoya to the Topeka Human Relations Commission to fill an expired term ending February 4, 2021. C is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Christine Steinkuhler to the Topeka Landmarks Commission for a term ending December 31, 2021. D is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Linda Sho Morgan to the Topeka Tourism Business Improvement District Advisory Board for a term ending December 31, 2020. E is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Stephanie Gasson to the Topeka Tourism Business Improvement District Advisory Board for a term ending December 31, 2020.
We have heard the appointments. The mayor does not have a vote. What is the pleasure of the body? Councilman Jensen?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Councilman Jensen. Second. We have a second by Councilman Emerson. If there's no discussion, we proceed with voting.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voting yes, the motion passes. If I could please have the individuals that were just appointed to commission stand up so that you could be recognized. Thank you so much. Thank you for your service to our community. Your volunteerism is absolutely needed in order for us to have amazing government, because it means that we're extending to our community opportunities to lead and to help us shape the face of our community and the decisions that are going to be made in consequence of what you guys are doing. So thank you very much. We now move on to the consent agenda, if the clerk would read.
Okay, our minutes of the regular meeting of January 15, 2019, and there's a list of dance hall and after midnight applications that staff is recommending approval.
I don't know if you had the opportunity to take a look at the applications and the minutes, but if so, what is the pleasure of the body? We have a motion by Councilman Lesser, a second by Councilmember Cohen. Is there discussion? Seeing none, we proceed with voting.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. We now move on to the action items. Item A, if the clerk would read.
A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout authorizing the City of Topeka, Kansas to issue its revenue bond Sunflower Foundation Project Series 2019 in the principal amount of $10 million for the purpose of financing the acquisition, construction, renovation, furnishing, and equipping of certain nonprofit healthcare, educational, and resource facilities in the city. Authorizing the execution of a trust indenture between the city and Security Bank of Kansas City as trustee. Authorizing the execution of a lease agreement between the city and Sunflower Foundation Healthcare for Kansas, a Kansas non-for-profit corporation, and authorizing and approving certain additional documents and actions in connection with the issuance of said bond.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Governing body, tonight we are here to consider approval of authorized issuance of approximately $10 million in bonds for the Sunflower Foundation project. There would be no liability, general obligation, or budgetary impact for the city. I do have one clarification that I wanted to mention. It was in the background information, the cover sheet, that reflected that Sunflower is renovating 2 buildings. They're actually renovating 2 instead of 3, as it mentions. It's mentioned in other locations that it's actually 2, but I wanted to make sure to make that clarification. Staff and members of the Sunflower organization are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, City Manager. Do we have questions in the body with regards to this item? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want a little briefing for the people at home. I know I got a couple of calls that they weren't really sure what this was. We have Sunflower Soccer, we have Sunflower this, we have Sunflower that. And so I just thought just a little something would be nice. Thank you.
City Manager.
Right. This organization is a nonprofit organization. They intend to renovate these buildings in order to house both their offices and also the ability to conduct training for other nonprofit organizations that may be connected to them in some way, and so that they would have an opportunity to be able to do training at that location. And so this is an opportunity to take 2 buildings that right now are not currently being used and to be able to include them. They're in rental space right now, and this would give them a permanent home that they would own. Oh, the address? It's on Southwest 6th Street. I don't remember the exact number that it would be, but it's on Southwest 6th Street, about approximately Wanamaker, just to the east of the roundabout that's there, in the old Menninger Hill area.
Thank you, City Manager. Additional questions from the body? Seeing no questions, do we have a motion? Motion approved. We have a motion made by Councilmember Lesser. We have a second by Councilman Cohen. If there's no further discussion, we proceed with voting.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. We now move on to item B, if the clerk would read.
B is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout adopting the 2018 Standard Traffic Ordinance, STO, and local amendments thereto, amending TMC 1015-010 and 020.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Last meeting, the staff went through the presentation regarding the standard traffic ordinance and uniform public offense code. Those items are presented for consideration tonight. And staff is here to answer any questions if you have.
Do we have questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. No questions. I think the staff did a great job after some discussion back and forth. I worked with staff and sent out in advance of the meeting 4 small changes between the STO and the Tupac, whatever. Topeka, UPOC, you know. Anyway. 3 of them are in the STO. The first is, just to review, is to add language on lines 24 and 25 that the amended document would be posted on the city's website, which you'll see again with the UPOC. The second is on line 60 and 61, is simply to put language in there. Topeka has no usable bike-only bike paths, so the language here would simply say, we delete that part of the STO. And the last, which is line 62 to 65, relates to bike pedals. And simply to clarify for enforcement purposes, that if there is a pedal that somebody is using that doesn't allow a reflector, doesn't have it, but it doesn't have a way to put one on it, that would be accepted, and that other than that, all pedals should have it. So with that, I'm open to questions, but I checked with staff and I would move the amended version of the ordinance, if that's okay.
We have received the amended version. We have a second motion by Councilwoman Hiller to accept the amended motion. We have a second by Councilman Padilla. Do we have discussion on this item? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Pretty soon.
So we're voting on the amendments, right?
Yes,
Okay.
The amended
on the amended version. Can everybody sit in unison?
We know what we're voting on. Good sign. Let's try this again. There we go.
This is not looking.
We already voted, so it's voted on.
Okay, let's try this again.
Moving too fast, that's all.
We did.
Okay. All right, now we'll vote. We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes. The amended version of the ordinance has passed. We now move on to item C, if the clerk would read.
C is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout adopting the 2018 Uniform Public Offense Code, UPOC, and local amendments thereto, amending TNC 905080.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. No additional comments relative to this item.
Councilwoman Heller.
Again, there is one amendment in red in the handout that you have, and that adds language on lines 24 and 25 to post the UPOC as amended by the City of Topeka on the City of Topeka's website as well. And I would move the amended version of the ordinance.
We have a motion to adopt the amended ordinance. We have a second by Councilman Jensen. Additional comments or questions with regards to this issue? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Councilmember Clear.
I think yours didn't take.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. We now move on to the non-action items. Non-action item A, if the clerk would read.
A is discussion for the purpose of reviewing the capital improvement plan policy and the financial parameters of the capital improvements plan for 2020 to 2029.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Governing body, tonight we begin one of the most important functions you do as city council members, which is to approve a budget for the next year. So tonight, to start that process, Interim Administrative and Financial Services Director Nick Hawkins will go through and provide a CIP, or Capital Improvements Policy overview. Nick?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the governing body. Tonight I want to give an overview of the CIP policy. We'll go over the calendar for the capital improvement plan process, and then I'll close it out by talking and giving an overview of the funding sources for the CIP, and that will set up what I think will be a really good discussion on Saturday, where we'll go over the specific projects in the 2020 to 2029 CIP. So I talked just a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today, and so starting off with what is the CIP. So I think first and foremost, it's a planning and priorities document. It is now a 10-year plan that was implemented as a best practice. By doing that, we've increased our bond rating, and that has primarily been due to the strong financial management and implementation of financial best practices. So again, it's a 10-year plan. The first 3 years comprise the capital improvement budget, and those are projects that are ready to be implemented right now and will be completed within a very short time frame. The first 5 years are projects that are planned and ready for implementation, and then years 6 through 10 are projects that are planned but not quite ready to implementation due to either timing or financial availability. So the benefits of the CIP are, again, like I said, it's a planning and priorities tool for the city. Helps communicate with the public, staff, and other government agencies on what we plan to do in our city over the next several years. And as the city manager mentioned, it is really a key step in the budget process. This is really where we kick off our formal operating budget process, because the projects that we talk about here will then get put in to our operating budget. So per the policy, a capital improvement plan or a capital improvement project can consist of several different things. One, it's real property acquisition, improvements to facilities exceeding at least $50,000, remodeling of any facilities exceeding $25,000, generally infrastructure projects, as well as city information technology infrastructure systems that comprise at least $50,000 collectively. There are a number of notable policies within the CIP. First is the general obligation bond cap, which I'll hit on a little bit later, but essentially we have a cap of $27 million over a 3-year period within the CIP. Two, consistent property tax levy. So what that's saying is there should be no sharp declines or increases to the property tax levy as it relates to debt service. So, no jumps or declines of 4 mils, let's say, but really just for planning purposes, keeping it consistent. Third is a utilization of federal and state revenue sources. So that's when possible, we should be pushing to utilize federal, local match grants, similar with the state. Fourth is consistency with the debt policy, which this CIP does. Also establishes a long-term funding plan for the enterprise funds, which would be our parking and utilities funds. We need to make sure that they're balancing the operating and capital needs when considering projects. Utilization and maintenance of current facilities first. So again, that's looking at updating and improving our current facilities before looking to build new. Also includes an inflation factor. All projects submitted should be cognizant and have an inflation factor assigned to it. And last but not least, we have a CIP review committee comprised of city manager, department directors, and relevant staff that go through and review all the projects in the CIP and ensure that they're consistent with the needs of the city. Looking at the calendar, so also per the policy, projects are due in the middle of December. Finance staff after that point reviews, meets with departments, ensures that all the projects are in good order, and then we have our CIP review committee meeting shortly after that. We have a final recommendation that we provide to the city manager, and a change this year has been that we're starting the process earlier so we can have more discussion on the CIP. So normally we wouldn't be sending out the project list until late in February. This year, we've sent that list to you last Friday. And tonight we're going over the financial aspect of it, and then Saturday we'll begin the discussion in earnest on the projects that are comprised within it. And then over the next month or so, we anticipate that there will be questions that you have. Finance will work and coordinate responses to those. And then when we get into March, we'll continue discussions at the city council meeting level. And at that point, if there's a level of comfort with it such that it could be adopted, we can prepare it for adoption in March, but looking at a tentative placeholder right now for April 2nd, which would follow in line with how we've approved it in past years. The third part of the presentation, I just want to go over some of the funding sources that in the CIP. So the first is general obligation bonds, and as I mentioned earlier, within the CIP policy, there's a current limit of $27 million over a 3-year outlook. That was put in place in the 2016 CIP policy, but informally it's been since I think about 2008 or 2009, which I think we all know what was going on at that time. There was a recession. The city had previously had a cap on its geo spending, but was not operating at the time under a cap. And so in order to control debt spending within the city and fall in line with the economic picture at the time, the $9 million per year was put into place, and it really has controlled and leveled our overall geo bond spending within the city. So I know there were a number of council members that were integral in that process, and it has made a big impact on our overall debt service picture. For the 2020 to 2029 CIP, we are going to request to extend that cap. And so what you see in your project list is $33.6 million for the 3-year outlook. A number of reasons for that. One is the capacity that we have within our debt service fund without hitting our mill levy is there, that we can do these additional projects, and the need is there, and we'll talk about those specific projects on Saturday. But again, we think that the capacity and the need is there to do this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Other things on general obligation bonds, they finance general municipal projects, public facilities, neighborhood projects, public safety, streets, and quality of life. The city's full faith and credit pledged to repaying bonds, so really what that means is there is a very high assurance that we will repay these bonds, and because of that, it's one of the more advantageous funding sources that we have in the city. State law permits 30-year borrowing, and the city has now moved to a 15-year repayment. It's also the least expensive form of borrowing due to the full faith pledge. With all that being said, we have the third highest rating available from Standard & Poor's. And again, I think a lot of that has been due to the strong financial management best practices that we've put into place. So what this next slide shows is our current and projected geo bond debt that incorporates the additional cap that we're requesting. As you can see, over the next 5 years, we are still seeing a downward trend in our overall indebtedness. And if you look out even a little bit beyond that, there's a little blip in 2025, 2026, but then it continues back down on a trend. And for the last 5 or 6 years, we've had a relatively stable geo bond debt picture of about 163, 165 million. I'll touch briefly on revenue bonds. So the city also issues combined utility revenue bonds to fund projects related to water, wastewater, and stormwater systems. Although they operate independently for repayment purposes, bondholders benefit from the financial strength of combining those three funding sources. And again, revenues from the utility system are used to pay debt service on the bonds. We currently have a Moody's rating of AA3, which is the 4th highest rating available. One thing I'll point out for this CIP is it does assume a continuance of a 655 rate increase with the projects that are listed in there. So it does assume that, and I think that's important to note as we begin discussions on CIP. Another thing that gets brought up consistently when we talk about the CIP are the use of temporary notes. These are used to fund construction and process and other short-lived borrowing purposes. Once a project is complete and the final cost is known, these notes are then refinanced with the long-term bonds. Really what this does is it helps us be more accurate when we're borrowing. So instead of going out and bonding for a $5 million project that as we go through the project may end up costing $4.6 million, we're not collecting all those bond proceeds. We're waiting until the project is completed, we bond it at a lower cost, and then are not paying interest on that additional $400,000. Because of the interest rate environment that we're in now, there's really not much of an additional cost, if any, really at this point in terms of interest, because when we do receive bond proceeds, we invest that, we collect interest revenue on that, and many times it comes very close to canceling out any interest payments that we would be making on the projects. So because of that, it's an advantage for us when we do use that, and something that we use in most of our geo bond projects. Some of the benefits to borrowing, again, it's immediate capacity for capital projects that are needed today. It lowers the risk of project cost inflation. So if you think about if you're funding a $5 million cash project, you're waiting until you have all of the cash available to do that. By that time, there is an inflation factor that's included in those projects. So a project today is going to cost more in 5 years. And so by borrowing now, we're taking advantage again of good rates and getting it at the best possible cost. Third, intergenerational equity. So the project is paid over time by its direct beneficiaries. That is something that is consistent with our debt policy, and something that when you see cities across the country, that is a very important component of borrowing for projects, is that the people who use it are the ones that are paying this down. It also helps with our cash reserves and improves our overall budgetary stability. So we know that we've got these projects in line. We have the funding in place to do them. We're not going on a year-to-year basis wondering if we have the capacity to do that. Those projects are set in stone and available to start working on. And again, as I mentioned before, currently the interest rate environment is such that we're really paying very little to borrow or to debt finance our projects right now. Other sources for the CIP are primarily cash funded, and so the list here, citywide half cent, countywide half cent, special revenue funds, IT funds, these are all cash funding sources, and they're allocated on an annual basis. On the general fund and debt service side, in the past couple of years, if you remember during the annual operating budget process, we haven't budgeted the cash and debt service projects, but instead have waited until the end of the year to see if there are any reserves available to fund those projects. And when we get to that year-end reserve, our first priority is generally to push forward capital projects that we were not able to fund in the operating budget. And I would anticipate that we would probably do something similar this year. And I'll talk next week about budget priorities for 2020, and you'll see a continuing theme about deferred maintenance and other challenges that we're having. But this is a part of it right here. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Councilwoman Clear.
What are the donations?
So the primary example that we have of that in Topeka is the Topeka Zoo Master Plan. And so private funders can put forth matching grants, if you will. We have one project in there this year for, I believe, a new facility at the zoo that someone is wanted to see, and so they said, I'll put in this amount of money, and if you provide the rest.
Okay,
So it's
thank
projects
you.
like that.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation. We now move on to action item B.
B is an update on City Hall renovation project and discussion about future project budget amendment.
City Manager.
So governing body, tonight, I'm going to introduce Deputy City Manager Gerber to kick this off, and then I'll make some comments after he's talked, and also Dr. Peak have talked regarding the renovation project.
Governing body, good evening. About 2.5 months ago, we made a presentation to this group related to the City Hall project, and it was a robust discussion where we heard a lot of feedback from you related to the project. And as we went back and looked at the videotape and tried to formulate what we had heard, I think what we heard centered around two main areas. And one was, what have you spent and on what? And how did we not include some of the original scope of the project in the original scope? Stuff that we think we need now. We heard that loud and clear. And then we heard you ask us to define the base phase and how much it would take to complete what we would call the base phase of the project. So what we did is we went back and again reviewed all of that information, put it together in a memo form, which we've sent to you and which is also included in the packet tonight. And in just a few minutes here, Jason Peak will go through that memo, and he'll do it briefly, bearing in mind that, as Councilwoman Ortiz has pointed out, there is a game this evening that is of interest to her at least, and probably many of us. So, so he will be doing that. And Councilman Mays.
You don't know what I'm talking.
So this evening, we believe very strongly in this project, and we feel like the need is great, and the project needs to move forward. But as always, I want to emphasize that our role here tonight is to provide you information so that you can make an informed decision. We're not trying to sell you on this. We do simply just want to provide you information so that you can make a good decision. Before Jason gets going, I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce a few folks in the audience who've been on our team and who could also answer questions. I see Vance Kelly in the back from Trainer Architects, Bill Nager from Bartlett and West, and Willie Brooks and Dan Foltz from KBS who've been on our team as well. So they're also here present to support and to answer any questions that you might have. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Peak.
Sure. Good evening, governing body. Just to kind of follow on that theme, what I'm going to go through tonight in the presentation is hit most of the information that was in the memo attached with this item. I'm going to do that by kind of providing a timeline of the key events, of answering kind of how we've gotten to the discussion that we're at today. Talk a little bit about our plan development process. Talk specifically about the budget and the increased cost items. Once again, talk about tax credits for this project, the impact they can have on the overall cost. And then lastly, based on some of the discussion, hit on some cost comparisons to help kind of put this project in frame to other projects occurring in the region as well as in our community. As the Deputy City Manager said, what we're really, the council report before you is looking for a budget amendment for what we call the base phase of the project, which is basically City Hall. So when you hear us talk about base phase, that is the municipal portion of the building. It does not include renovation of council chambers, relocating municipal court to City Hall. It sticks with the original intent of what the project was put in the CIP. As Nick mentioned, we're going to be talking CIP on Saturday. So what we did is we took those other pieces that we presented to you in November and are putting those as a request into the CIP. And so those would be up for consideration and discussion within the CIP. So with that being said, just kind of back up, how did we get here? I realize February 22nd, I'll be officially 3 years in Topeka. And so this was one of the first projects in the CIP that I participated on. And when I got here, this project was basically what I call an MEP project. We've talked about, there were complaints about sewer gas smell on the second floor, and let's get a project in there to fix that. So as we looked at that with staff, and as I've talked with you about applying asset management, I mean, looking at what's the right treatment at the right time, looking at what the cause of this MEP issue is. Part of it's not only the piping, but the way our mechanical system's designed. It pulls all the return air into the corridor. That's not current code practice, and so there would be challenges in addressing that issue without addressing the larger mechanical engineering and plumbing system within the building. So that led us to look at kind of creating a more comprehensive renovation project, because as we take out or replace those mechanical systems, we're literally tearing into the walls of the building. So the one way to think about it is the same way we do our streets, is we replace underground utilities and put the surface back up. You know, in the building project, we're replacing the stuff behind the walls, so it's about also putting back those walls in the right location. So as we're working on this project development, we had a number of issues occur with City Hall. We talked about some of the masonry failures on the exterior, as well as the fire service line that provides the water flow for fire service to the building. We had to replace that. And so we continued to work on those issues, and had some immediate need within the building related to the cooling system. On the mechanical side, we had a chiller that was really, it had been nursed to the end of its life, and had a desire to get that done in a timely manner. And so, you know, November of 2018, we kind of came to you and talked about all the work that we've been working on, and as the city manager said, got feedback from you. I want to kind of talk about the our design development process and the renovation guidelines. So some of the things we shared with you in November is, you know, we talked about how this project was a renovation project. And we had a number of moving parts occur during that design process. We had the credit union relocate out of the building. We knew IT was moving out of the building after we'd already kind of put this project in. That created some opportunities for us to evaluate during the renovation project development. And so our team was working in parallel to get the immediate need of the chiller replacement underway, and that work has already started and will be wrapped up here by the end of February, so we'll be good with the plant system for the summer. But we also started looking at what we call the programming process. So as we're tearing up this building and putting it back together, what does the future use of that building look like? And as I said, we had pieces moving out the building. So we definitely added scope to the project to kind of look at that programming. What's the right use and makeup in the building? And that led us down a path to have conversations about municipal court moving over, looking at renovating council chambers. But throughout that process, what I'd say is we're looking at renovation was, we have a historic building. And so we want to make sure we're respectful to the character of that building, but also modernizing this facility to represent a modern office that has energy efficient systems. Previous CIP projects have included holistic like LED light replacement, mechanical control systems. So we kind of rolled those into this project, making sure that as we put the building back together, we're setting it up to be in good shape. It also allowed us to look at operations and consolidate those to make them efficient. The way the building's separated now, we have kind of little warrens of rooms and in different corners, and so this gave us some opportunity to look, can we make that building more efficient, which would lead to staff efficiencies and other things. Also kind of balance, we talked with you about balancing the need of improved security in the building. We are a public building, so we want to have a welcoming access, but given our use and operation, still being able to maintain good security for functioning. So that drove a lot of kind of the design decisions we did in the project. And then moving on to kind of get into the details on the cost, because that's really part of the discussion where we are tonight is looking at the expense. And so the renovation project had our current project budget of $8.2 million. And what this slide shows is existing expenses to date. So kind of line by line accounting. We had, the initial City Hall renovation assessment report. This was done to kind of provide that high level scope of what we thought it would take to renovate the building. We had the emergency fire line replacement repair that came out of this project. As I said, we had some opportunities with IT relocating the server room. Even when they had planned to relocate, their server room was going to stay in the building. We saw that by moving that out, we could create some additional space for other programming needs. So we've paid to relocate the IT server room over to the Holiday Building. As we moved through design processes, we got into the first phase, the schematic design, which is our early design phase. And then, like I said, those other pieces of folks moving out led to additional what we call programming analysis, looking at the future use of the building. We also looked at the internal ADA assessment of this building as well as TPAC. And we did what's unusual for this building, a special noise study related to our chiller replacement. Our chiller and cooling system sits underneath the stage of TPAC. So making sure as we're replacing that system that it's not going to impact the events and things that TPAC puts on. And then the big expense that's been paid for to date was the cooling towers and chiller, basically our plant system. That's the construction that's going on the east side of the building. So we've spent approximately $2.27 million to date. We have an existing contract with the project team for what we call design plan development. That would be basically for getting us through the design plans. And so total expense and encumbered about $2.75 million. And so out of that project, we have basically 5.45 in remaining project funds. So that's just summary of budget, and I'd just pause right there if there are any specific questions on that.
Questions from the body? Seeing none? Oh, Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you. Just struck me, didn't we do the roof already, or some roof work?
I'll talk about, we have done some roof work on this building, so as we get into the increased cost, I'll talk about specifically what that is.
Thank you.
Okay.
Moving on. So, we came back to you last time for a total overall increase to do what we called the base phase, council chambers and municipal court. This is the increased cost basically to complete the base phase as proposed, and I'll go through each of these again. We talked about the fire service line replacement, so that's work that's already been completed. The IT server room, that's moving the server room over to the Holiday Building. The programming scope, ADA analysis, and chiller noise study, I covered that. Chillers, cooling towers, and MEP. This roof item that reflects the cost to replace the roof over City Hall. As we basically do the design work, we're putting new air handling units on the roof up there. And that roof within the time of the project will kind of reach that threshold for replacement. So our recommendation was to go ahead and replace that as we're putting new equipment on it. This past year, we replaced the roof over the municipal court and TPAC side where we'd had a leak. So that is not reflected in this cost.
Okay.
That was paid through our facilities operation funds and not out of this project.
Okay, thank you.
At the November meeting, we talked about the increased level of masonry repairs, basically the spalling of the stone on the exterior of the building, so that's what that cost represents. It's an old building, so we do have hazardous material reflective of construction at the time, so we have asbestos removal. This is within our mechanical rooms that we've put a budget number of what that estimated cost would be. The elevator in City Hall, basically to rehab the controls and the systems for the elevator. We talked about improving the security of this building. So part of that is having that elevator and the ability to control it tied into that security system, as well as the mechanical components that make it run. The next item is what we call furniture, fixtures, and equipment. This was not included in the original scope, and this is, basically the contents that you would put back in the building, and reflects somewhat a change in the renovation style. Part of this is going to some of the open office concepts, so replacing furniture and fixtures that are compatible with that, as well as setting up the shared meeting spaces to be usable by all. The next two items, design work. So we had additional design work that we did not expect for the MEP associated with the cooling towers and the elevator. And then KBS can speak better to this, but just the overall increasing trends in construction cost since we initiated this project. If you remember at that November meeting, we also came to you with a request for almost a doubling of the fire station renovation project, which was kind of a reflection of that increasing trend in construction cost. And so that totals would be a total amendment of $4.7 million to complete the base phase of City Hall. I'll move on to talk about tax credits. So we talked to you about this before, but just to make sure that we have a good understanding of this. So the base phase, the renovation of City Hall, we've had trainer architects who's got a lot of experience in helping us and estimate what the anticipated tax credits would be for this project, because you don't receive tax credits until the project is completed. You get it certified by the state, and they basically give you a note that then you can sell to someone looking to purchase tax credits. So based on that past history for the renovation, we're anticipating about $2.6 million of revenue we could receive in tax credits for the project. So one way to think about that is, we need authorization to spend the funds to do the project, but there's a potential that you could have $2.6 million cash coming back to you after completing the cost, which would reduce that overall total project cost. The other two items we show, there's about another $800,000, approximately $800,000 of tax credits available if we proceeded with the municipal court relocation, as well as renovation of the council chambers. So we're going to talk a little bit about construction cost. Number of different reasons that they vary. I apologize, I didn't have notes on this. So I hit most of these in my talking points, and I want to get to the actual comparison costs. So this chart in front of you here, we had a lot of discussion about the cost of this project, and so we worked with KBS and went back and looked, could we find some similar projects to help give a comparison of how the cost of the City Hall renovation project compares to others. So what do we have here is construction costs. What I would want to note, though, is the cost we show for Topeka City Hall. We know our total project cost, what we're paying the design team, what our financing costs. So we have our total project cost. We don't have that information from others, so that may be included in some of their costs, but just know that that's one reason why there's a little bit of difference. So basically the lowest cost we found was Morgan Hall. This was the renovation of the Washburn Administration Building. That had a construction cost about $238 per square foot. So we're looking at what's that cost per square foot in 2015. And so that was the dollar value in 2015. You know, if we just use the CPI and adjust that for 2018, we're looking at about $255 a square foot, even for the lowest. The highest is, a project that's in proposal, Johnson County. Their downtown courthouse has a construction cost of $428 per square foot. That's a courthouse, a little bit different. I'll talk a little bit about Lenexa, Kansas. Their city hall, city center is $350 a square foot is what their construction cost. That was one of the buildings we went and looked at as we were evaluating, and some of the things that drive theirs is they have commercial tenant space in their building that they lease out to businesses. They also have Park University that they set up to have a campus location, and they created an auditorium as part of their city hall that's not only for city use, but Park University and community events. So there's a number of those are driving factors in their cost. And then the last one I'd talk about is you just approved revenue bonds for the Sunflower Foundation headquarters. And as you heard, they're renovating 2 old buildings out on the Miniger campus. And using the information from their revenue bonds, their costs are about $258 a square foot for construction. Then the last projects kind of compares, we talked about at the last meeting, the value, total value of some of the private projects that have gone on in the city. So what we did is we went back to the building permits for these. We took the construction value that the contractors put on the building permit because we don't, know what their total costs were. So this is looking at the construction dollars on the permit as well as the square footage from the plans. And so we had the Federal Home Loan Bank, which was completed last year at about $248 a square foot. The Cyrus Hotel, fabulous building, just opened up, was at $220 a square foot. On the lower end, we had the East Topeka Learning Center at $178 a square foot. And then we had the new KBI building out on Washburn's campus at $379 a square foot. So a couple of differences between these projects and City Hall. Some do have a historic aspect. We are definitely working towards historic tax credits in our project. And none of these projects reflected occupied buildings. So that's another challenge. We have to phase our construction so that we keep City Hall running. We did evaluate the cost of relocating staff out of City Hall and renting the space, and that was going to add another $800,000 to the project. So working with the contractor, we're able to figure out a way to not incur that cost. And so as the city manager indicated, we're here to provide information tonight, so it's a discussion item, and make sure that we get all your questions answered, so you have the information you need to make a decision. As I said, this Saturday, we're going to talk about CIP projects, so we'll talk in depth about facilities overall, but then also about the other 2 phases of City Hall. And then, what we had tentatively scheduled was to bring this back in 2 weeks on the 19th and request action on the proposed amendment. And with that, I'd just close and say, I think we've tried to respond to all the questions that you've had since November. We're willing and ready to respond to any other questions, like I said, to give you the information you need. And then lastly, we just, as Mr. Gober said, we understand the scale of this request. And just as from a technical standpoint, believe it's a good investment, if it's the desire to continue operations in City Hall long-term. Building costs are expensive, and we definitely heard that from you.
All right, we've heard the presentation. Do we have any questions? Oh, City Manager, before we go to Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would like to make a few comments. And I think the primary thing that I want to focus on for me as city manager, and I look at this project, the opportunity to move departments that work together, closer together, will increase communications and efficiency. So when I look at this project, that's one of the things that I look at and I'm most excited about as a possibility. The opportunity to bring this building up to code and fulfill its requirements under the current code is also another important part for us. And as I stressed, this is the base phase. We'll talk about later on phases at a later date. So we really tried to get back to the focus of what the initial project was and provide you that information so that you're able to make an informed decision. So.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. Did we all get a copy of everybody's questions that were asked?
So I summarized that in the memo that was sent out to you. I mean, the questions we got directly came from the council meeting were put in that memo.
Okay, but were there any other extra questions that?
I don't recall any, ma'am.
I did.
Councilwoman Heller.
I did have questions and answers that went back and forth. So,
And we can definitely get those to the body. I mean, we had some questions from Councilwoman Hiller about TPAC and their capital needs, and questions about that is not in that memo, and definitely we'll take questions you get tonight and package that up and get it back to everyone.
I just want to make sure that we all have all the questions that we need. I think for me, renovating is good, but we have a lot of facilities that need to be renovated that supersede, I think, this, and I'll write something up and get it to you, Jason.
Okay.
That would be my concern. I know after we talked about the renovation and all the money, I had a whole bunch of texts and emails on different fire stations and different buildings. And I know city employees used to be across the street, I think on the second floor of the bank over there, and we bought the Holiday building to bring, so that we're in two buildings. But I think one of my questions would be, is every office and every space, is it used up? Is there room to grow?
Yes, ma'am. So I mean, the short answer is not all the space under the current base renovation phase would be used. That's why we talked about there was ability to bring municipal court over and actually create a better court setting for the employees and the participants that come through court. That was what we called in our phase two. We also talked about there would be underutilized space on the first floor that the council could consider, looking at a community connection concept, whatever that may be. So under this base phase, those areas would not be finished out. The term that I understand from the contractors, they'd be white box, that basically we get the mechanical systems and the things that we need to do, but the overall finishes and final design of those spaces we would not do under the base phase, because we're able, through this renovation, to more efficiently use the existing space within the building, which frees up space for other opportunities.
Well, and I would like to know what you mean, if I may, Mayor.
Yes, Councilwoman Ortiz.
I would like to know what you mean by community. Would you say community events or community? Because I think we do a lot with the LEC building and with the Holiday building, and I used to see it a lot more. I don't see it so much now, downstairs in City Hall. But so I would like to know what do you mean? What does that entail? What are we trying to do? Because I know we talked about impact, and I was surprised to learn that they're saying we have space that they could use. And how much space is that? I mean, and what do they need? Because we need to make sure that we're all on one accord here, because we should be taking care of staff before. And I'm not saying that we're not. I'm just saying I look at it to make sure that we're taking care of staff before we take care of anybody else. And so that's some of my concerns is where are we at on maintenance on all that, and where are we at on renovations at places that have not been done for decades?
Sure. Yes, ma'am. We'll get you those answers.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you,
Councilwoman
Madam
Claire.
Mayor.
Thank you.
When was the last time we spent a large amount of money on maintenance in this, for this building?
Large amount of money. So we have done some piecemeal.
Yeah, when was it, when did we really, how many years ago?
I have not been, I mean, I don't have a specific answer, but I would tell you our approach to facilities has been piecemeal.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Lesser.
A couple questions, so I make sure that I have the right information as we move forward. Am I reading it correctly then, that basically the additional amount that that is being requested over the original project budget of 8.2 million is roughly about 4.7 million? Is that correct?
Yes.
Am I correct in that? Couple quick questions. How much asbestos removal did we have in the initial? Is this a 50,000 additional, or is this asbestos removal that's the first time it's added into the project?
I don't know that answer off the top of my head. Councilman, I'll get you that.
Similar question. We have City Hall elevator rehabilitation and then design work for the additional MEP and elevator of 200. Was the elevator not contemplated in the first plan? Or is this new in addition to what was budgeted in the first?
The elevator and the design work is in addition to what was budgeted in the first plan, and the elevator renovation was not considered in the initial assessment that we did.
And then one comment and then one more question. We have increased base phase details. The furniture, fixture, and equipment isn't necessarily really an increase. That's more of a change in direction. Would you agree?
It's an increase in the sense it was not included in the original budget. So there was no, I guess what I'd say is there was no allowance in that 8.2 million. We didn't consider furniture and fixtures equipment.
So then, at the beginning, either we decided at that point in time that we weren't going to replace all the furniture, and then we decided that we were going to, but it wasn't included.
Yes.
Correct. And then the other question I have is in regards to the increased cost construction of 14%. This is a design build project, correct?
Yes.
So where exactly are we coming up with that 14%? Because I mean, obviously we're not putting it out for bid and having bids come back that are increased over the original estimate. So where is that? How are we determining that number?
So I mean, just incrementally as we're kind of developing these design plans, I mean, KBS is in touch with their subs and trying to estimate what those prices are. So we don't have a firm, bid package that we're going and getting that pricing, but it's as we've kind of gotten to these 50% plans, they're updating their estimates of what that cost would be. And that's where we're seeing the increase in construction costs from those items when we originally listed them.
So when I hear increase in construction costs, I generally would think that if I was pouring 500 square feet of concrete and my price of concrete went up from 5 years ago till now, but some of this isn't necessarily an increase in construction costs. Wouldn't it be more an increase because of the change in the plans that we've done because of the other things, or is it I'm trying to understand how we're coming up
Okay.
with a cost if we don't have actual
Trying to
bids.
work on getting you a
That's
better
fine.
explanation on that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Mayor?
Thank you for your comments. City Manager.
Madam Mayor and Councilman Lester, just to maybe a further explanation of the FF&E of the furniture. In projects past, the city, for whatever reason, didn't traditionally include furniture costs in those projects. It was not a good approach, and so we've tried to rectify that moving forward. And the other thing I would say is this does not include a wholesale replacement of furniture in City Hall. It is, for lack of a better term, a piecemeal approach, because some offices have newer furniture or furniture, you know, for example, I have a table I use as a desk. It works completely fine, and so the project wouldn't anticipate replacing something like that. So it's not a wholesale replacement of all the furniture in City Hall, just for clarification.
But it's primarily for, Madam Mayor, it's primarily for employee desks, cubicles, those workstations, those type of things.
That's correct.
How many employees do we have in City Hall?
I don't know off the top of my head, but we can
Get close. You gotta have a number that's close.
It's like 1,100.
50-something.
I'd say 150 or 200 in City Hall.
Total number.
So it's about 5,000 a workstation at that number. Okay.
Thank you very much. Additional questions? Oh, yes, Councilwoman Heller.
Thank you, Mayor. I just need to confess, I appreciate, I did have some questions at first. Some of them have been asked again this evening, so I feel good about that. But just to clarify the cost increase, the 4 point whatever million you were just talking about with Councilman Lesser is the increase to the base from the 8 point whatever we started with to 12.9, and then phases 2 and 3 add another 5 million to that. That's not the total.
Yes,
correct?
ma'am, and so, the way we've approached it, phases 2 and 3 are subject to the governing body keeping those, or agreeing to put those in the CIP. So we've really tried to separate those items from this project to have them go through the CIP process for review and consideration.
I thought so, and that I just want to state a concern overall. I mean, the staff is asking us to go 3 million, an average of 3 million a year over our $9 million cap, just to start with, ranging from about equal to the cap to going 10 million over the cap. Plus, they've mixed all the stuff together for the following 5 years, and so I don't know what that looks like. So I'm nervous about it, and I feel like we need to make sure that we really understand the entire scope of the project, and your discussion of whiteboarding helps a little bit, because if the basement's just empty, then nobody needs to go down there, I guess, and if they don't touch this area, that won't show. If we whiteboarded this corner of City Hall right after you walk in, maybe you can help us a little bit with a picture on that, but, because I suppose they could be closed off indefinitely. I want to make sure, some of the back and forth that we had was not because I was trying to get TPAC remodeled, but I wanted to make sure if there were systemic things in the building that we were aware of, that they would be covered, so that at least, and they've not been included. So we finally got to a point on that today to at least have a list to look at, I think. I want to be comfortable that we've got a good idea of what this whole thing would be. I like it. I want to do everything pretty much always. But included, for instance, the fire engines. There's no fire engines in the first 5 years. They got pushed down the road. And we need to know of the CIP. And so we need to know where they are.
City Manager?
There are fire stations listed in year 2 and 3 of the CIP, ma'am.
I will stand corrected, but in 2 and 3, but we've had them every year in the past. So just looking at those as an example to look at what we're not doing, including going way over and being sure, because I echo Councilwoman Ortiz's sentiments of, is this the most important? Just, if we stop right now, and I'm not saying we should, but there's so many needs that we're talking about, could we stop right now? And I'm not saying we should, but could we?
We could stop with a mechanical plant, but you're not going to gain any of the efficiency of the system we put in place because you haven't, you replaced the heart, but you haven't replaced the network.
Got it.
And the network's still a problem. And so, I'll try and write something up to you to just explain what, try and think in terms of our pavement management program, right treatment at the right time. We're at a point this building needs to be renovated. So staff's recommendation, best investment of the dollars is to proceed with the renovation of City Hall. Because, we could defer it. We have lots of facilities, and we're going to talk about our approach to addressing facility needs citywide on Saturday. But just as we make these trade-offs and pushing these discussions down the road, the same thing Nick said, we're deferring that cost to a later date, which means it will likely be more expensive at a later date. And so that's the trade-off. And what we're trying to do, is your technical folks is we're going to talk about asset management, having the inventory, the condition, those pieces, and just like streets, talk about where we need to do preventative maintenance, where we can get by with rehabilitation, replacement of parts and pieces. And then ultimately those other parts where we need to redo the entire system. And that's where we feel we are with City Hall at this point.
If I could ask one more.
Yes, Councilwoman Heller.
We talked a little bit, we got to look at pictures the last time and looked at the design and and it's very innovative and there were elements that were pretty different for a lot of us. One of them was the security system and the idea of putting, in effect, glass walls in each of the hallways of the main part of City Hall, not having the front desk anymore, but having monitors. I remember I kind of walked it and I tried to feel what it would feel like if I were there. And I worried about being a little claustrophobic, actually, with getting off an elevator and having this solid wall. I also heard just kind of around the hallways a little pushback about that switch out from a more traditional security system to the one that's proposed. Could you just talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, as I indicated, the approach we took was City Hall is, it's a public building, so we want it to be a welcoming space where you come in, but have adequate security. And so that approach that we put in was rather than being stopped as you come through the front door at a security desk, we'd have a check-in station, a concierge, if you will, to the side that if you had an appointment to meet someone, you can check in. They could either through the elevator, let you go over to the elevator and go up to the floor, and then once you get off the floor, there would be a glass partition that would not allow you to enter that space. Some of the changes we were making on those floors was letting additional light into the corridors and improving that. So I get what you're saying about the claustrophobic feel. Tried to illustrate that wouldn't be there with that change. But then staff, with our ID badges would be able to fob through those access. There would also be cameras to monitor who's in those corridors. And then that way we're able to control who's where in the building, but still meet that need of being a welcoming building for people to come in. But you couldn't just come in and go right upstairs to someone's office if you were not a city employee with appropriate badge. Someone would have to let you in. And that was a concept we saw used in some other city halls. There's definitely, you could go to a more hardened security setup, like we have for coming into council chambers, running people through a magnometer, having a police presence. We were just trying to balance that need of making it secure, which it is, but also be inviting to the public.
Thank you, because I'm one of the people that doesn't like to see all that apparatus in the front, and so I was really excited about the change, yet I just needed to get used to it, I guess.
Yes.
So, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hiller. Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Peak, first of all, thank you for bringing this to us. And I do appreciate the way you presented it tonight and also some of the questions at staff. I did submit some questions to Mr. Gerber, which I'd be fine if you want to send those out to everyone. Because one of the questions I had is, I've heard over the years that the Holiday Building was designed so there could be floors added on. And I guess I contend that, I feel like just as a council person I do, and I'm sure staff does it so much more, there's a lot of trips across, between two buildings in a day, and it's really a breakdown of communication a lot of times, I think, or inefficient. Turns out that I don't think that was possible for the amount of space you needed. But all that said, I appreciate all the work. I guess I'm honestly, I'm a hard sell on this, and it's, both because of the cost of it as well as, in general, government always grows. I don't know for how many years this was all we had, and then we added another building, and we still need more. And it just seems like there's never a cap on what government needs. We always need more. A lot of companies now don't have as much staff and have smaller facilities because now we have computers. We don't have, 300 people typing and stuff. So that's just a philosophy thing for me. So please understand as we go forward, that's something I struggle with. But I did have maybe more of a question about the scale of the project. Dr. Peak, you'd mentioned that the first floor was going to it could be left white boxed if we didn't do the other phases.
Not the entire first floor. There was basically the northwest corner, a portion of that we talked about, the community connection.
Okay. Well, one of the things I'm struggling with is that the bank moved out, IT moved out. Seems like a lot of the second floor is empty right now. It seems like it is. Now, maybe that's, but it seems like we have an excess of space, and probably as we do this and do a new layout, I bet we're going to actually get more space, if you will, because it'll be laid out more efficiently. So I guess my question, is there any place right now, thinking of this totally in financial terms, is there any space right now the city is leasing that we could move the people out of that leased space and bring it into here to help pay for this project? Is there anything like that we're doing right now?
I'm not aware, but that was part of what we went through in the programming analysis, was looking at Holiday, and it was, do you have enough space to bring, say, all of permitting over here?
Right.
And so it's kind of like what do you call it, Tetris, where you're trying to fit in those different spaces. And so where we landed on that, what we thought was best utilization of space was relocating municipal court to the basement. And that's what really kind of filled up the building as we looked at it. But I'll look and see if there's anything else out there that we missed.
And the other thing that I would like to add is that a lot of the movement that has been happening in this building has been preparation, expecting that construction would start and having to move people. So a lot of what you're seeing right now, there's people that are tight over there because we were trying to make space here for when, like, if they started on the third floor, they would need space to relocate individuals into those spaces. So our offices would be moving, and what they were trying to create with the spaces that you're mentioning is that availability so that we didn't have to expend the $800,000 that it would have taken to rent space to be elsewhere.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. If I could just ask a follow-up, I'm sorry, because I took a pretty circuitous route to my question there. But I guess my question, Dr. Peak, was, and maybe you didn't understand this, is there any place we're renting space right now? Okay.
I don't believe there is.
I'm not aware of any, but Councilman, I'll double check on that, make sure.
Great. I was hoping we could figure out a way to make the numbers work by, we used to rent space at, once there was 515 Kansas in a building, that was where engineering and public works was.
Right, and Councilman Ortiz, like we used to.
City manager or deputy city manager.
Mayor and Councilman Emerson, we do lease some space at the old armory, I guess, for lack of a better term. I'm not familiar with the details of that contract, but we do have some space there. But I don't think it would necessarily meet the requirements of what you're talking about. And again, we really tried to take a wholesale programming approach to this and do things move purchasing and finance together, so we could perhaps with HR, because they work together very closely, and perhaps we'd be able to do some, not fill some positions through attrition. Moving probation and the court together makes a lot of sense because they work so closely, and right now it's not a very functional atmosphere for them. So that we tried to envision all of that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Peak.
Councilman Jensen.
Thank you. Is there enough room to bring fire administration here and then sell that building? That's not attached to the fire station over there, if memory serves.
We haven't analyzed that, Councilman Jensen, but that is something that we could look at, what space they have with the needs and the space that we have here. I think the one thing we'd want to do is go back and look, though, at where, as we look at long-term, the decision as to whether we would want municipal court and probation in this building before we would bring fire back over, that idea to move. Because that definitely is one of the places where we believe that someday, if that could be done, that would improve workability for those two areas. So we'd want to be sure that we're not putting ourselves in jeopardy of being able to make that long-term decision move that would be positive.
That would be a way of convincing one less building to pay for.
We'll look at the space necessary to be able to do so.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Jason, is the bank gone? I mean, I know they're gone out, I mean, are they gone, period?
They relocated, I believe, to
Southeast 6th.
Southeast 6th and Croco, to a facility out there.
Oh, okay. Because IT went to Holiday, right? And then
IT
in
is
the basement.
Holiday. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, the one point that I will make is I do understand the concerns that we have with our finances. But I will never forget when I was elected in 2013 and we were having our meetings, we didn't have the screens. We used to use this board. And it's kind of great that they still keep it updated. We were having concerns with regards to the fact that we felt that when people came into this chamber, which was the people's chamber, it felt like it was antiquated. Another thing that is also of concern is the fact that, as we know, and I think that Councilmember Hiller made the statement that we also own TPAC, and that is a building that is also in need of a refresher. So as we consider how we're going to maintain the assets that we have today, so that then we are not waiting for critical issues to occur for us to have to really incur in expenses, I think that we are having the proper conversations on how to move forward with this. But I think that this is just one of those things that we're going to have some really big picture thinking on how we could maximize the net present value of the dollars that we have today, and consider as well the financing options that we're going to have, because there's already talks about interest rates raising twice next year, because there's challenges, and we are in a time in which money is not really heavily charged for us when we're financing to try to do things like this. So I don't want to make the analogy of the roads, but let's take a look at the building. Let's take a look at what has to happen so that our building does not become the analogy of the roads that we did not maintain, and then we're having to fix, because that's not a position that we ever want to be in. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.
This point in time, having no additional items, Councilwoman Ortiz, in the agenda, we move on to the announcements, starting with the city clerk.
For the February 12th agenda, we have two presentations, strengthening police and community partnerships and the 2018 year-end report for the planning department. On the consent agenda, we'll have 5 resolutions approving special events and 5 noise exceptions. For the action items, we will have a resolution for Sherwood Crossing Villa West TIF District, setting the public hearing. That's located at 17th and Wanamaker. And then we have the charter ordinance for the Topeka Metropolitan Transit Authority. And discussions, we will discuss the 2020 budget priorities.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The only announcement I have, I did send to the governing body an email yesterday that we have made a hire in the finance officer position, finance director position, and excited to have Jessica Lamondola join our staff. She'll be starting March 4th. I think that we've got lucky here with a good hire that has experience already working in a city as a finance officer at a city of the same, actually a little larger city than we are now. Also has experience doing the budget in a previous position, and also worked for Moody's Investor Services, which are the folks that give us our ratings on bonds, and she understands the process necessary in order to make our city financially sound, look at our policies correctly, and so I think that'll be very beneficial for us in the future. I look forward to getting her here. She's already worked on signing a lease for a property here in the community, and she's getting ready to come. So we're excited. I'm excited.
I'm sure Nick is excited.
Timing could not be better.
So a few things. First of all, we are celebrating Black History Month. I did a live recording today, just encouraging all of us to, just talk to people and try to understand if you really are not familiar and aware with, why we celebrate Black History Month, and you want to really start developing some competencies and compassion and understanding why certain relationships are strained all around. It's really cool to just ask and say, hey, what's happening, and help me understand, and why is this important to you, and how can I be an ally? So I'm encouraging everybody in our community to maybe just consider having that courageous conversations and just start talking about the value of inclusion and why we celebrate these things, so that we don't take them for granted when they come around. They're not just celebrations that are empty. Today we had an amazing report from the group that I call #the Mighty Topeka 8. Councilman Padilla is part of that group, which is the group that went to Bloomberg Harbor City Leadership Initiative, and they provided a report that talks about how they are working on creating a value proposition for the citizens. And we talked about how maybe talking in our community about inclusive prosperity and talking about these terms that maybe some of us really understand mean absolutely nothing to a family member that is struggling to pay their rent, that is trying to get to work. But when we start changing it and we start adapting the language to share with our constituents that what we're doing is, like what we had a few weeks ago, the Go Topeka board sit down and meet for a whole day pretty much and say, who are we going to give incentives to? And what are going to be the parameters? And are we really going to give incentives to people that are not adding value to the families in the Topeka community because they're not paying enough? So, where are they going? Having conversations on how we're going to get people to work. Having conversations about, hey, we're developing an East Topeka Learning Center because we have noticed that families that are not able to move up and have upward mobility is because they haven't had access to the education, and they don't do it because they don't have access to transportation. So we're now having schools being built in areas strategically so that everybody can have equal opportunity. So we're talking a little bit about that, and I'm going to be a little bit unconventional and ask Councilmember Padilla if he would like to add something really quick before I get to my next announcement.
Well, thank you, Mayor. It was an experience that I wish everybody on the council could have participated in. It was really rewarding, though, to see how far Topeka is ahead. I know we often criticize ourselves and say that Topeka is behind the times. Topeka's not doing this. When we went there in New York City and we started to visit with people, they started pointing at us and say, you guys really have got something going on already that we haven't even started to do. The commitment, though, is that we don't forget it and that we don't put it on a shelf somewhere and just think of it as, something we did for a while and now we'll just walk away from it. It takes active participation. Communication is extremely important, along with relationship building in the community. They really have to understand what is happening in Topeka, not just the words, not just the billboards. They have to have a connection to how those improvements network to them and how it will improve their lives in Topeka. And all of us have a responsibility to make that communication a priority. And for me, it was kind of intimidating to sit in that kind of a group, to hear all these things going on and listen to the Harvard professors talk about concepts that may seem way above us, but we're already in the clouds. We're already up there already. So we felt very confident. And at some point, and I think we talked about that today, Mayor, is that Topeka almost dominated the conversation in some of those presentations because we have the initiative already in place. We have the people in place. And I encourage everyone, when they have an opportunity to talk in some detail about Topeka, don't speak in broad terms, speak in detail. Consider what the public has tried to associate with. I know a lot of people come up to me and ask me, well, how will I benefit from Cyrus Hotel? How will I benefit from the plaza? And you stop and take time to explain how generations of tax dollars through our economic development program and efforts will help Topeka, and that way they, in fact, will have a direct benefit. It doesn't mean that they have to walk in to the Cyrus K. It doesn't mean that they have to go to the plaza, but they have to believe that we are really trying to bring overall economic development, not just for the few, but for everyone. And Topeka did its work. It was not easy work, a lot of reading and long nights, but it was worth it, and it was something that I appreciate having the opportunity to attend. Thank you.
So on that vein, the other few things that I wanted to say is, wow, Cyrus Hotel. Wow. If you have an opportunity, go get, like my daughters like to do, they like to have a Shirley Temple, if that is your preference. But well, or something stronger. But it is an absolute exquisite building, and I think that it was wonderful to have Councilwoman Hiller there. It would have been great to have Councilman Jensen, because Councilman Jensen, Councilwoman Hiller, and Mayor Wolgast were an integral part of working and pushing a community forward. And when we were pushing, we were getting no's and being told, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. And then that night, sitting at the corner, looking outside at the bright lights, at the pennant, knowing that the iron rail was there, knowing that Brewbank is coming right next door, just everything that's happening and is popping up and all the things that are yet to come. It was just one of those moments that I got verklempt, which is not hard to do because I'm pretty sentimental. And then as we celebrate something happening, we celebrate as well something that is not there anymore, and that is the buildings in the area that the plaza is gonna start being in. So two final quick notes. We have, for the council members, I have here in my hands, and I wanted to show everybody in the public, that we had in our strategic planning session talked about developing a youth council. And I don't like that it's been called the Mayor's Youth Council, because I've been the person playing point with this. It really is the City of Topeka's Youth Commission. And that Youth Commission is going to be housed under the Greater Topeka Partnership, is going to fall under Forge. So they're going to have, the Greater Topeka Partnership is allocating funds and resources to helping these young individuals from the ages of 14 to 21 to become engaged in our community in a big way. And part of that, the council, your council, met in our strategic planning session, and we said we really want to see a revitalization of a youth commission in which each council member will mentor and work directly with a representative of their district, and just do a quarterly meeting, and we'll bring to them items that we want to have discussion and input from young people for. Well, the Youth Commission has met. They did interviews, and they have presented to the council members some of the first slates. There's 2 council districts that are pending, and that is District 1 and District 5 is pending a person that would fit the criteria. So council members, if you know of young individuals that you can move around, we have a beautiful, rich diversity in those individuals. When the meeting is done, I will pass you the names of these young individuals so that you can then reach out to them and develop your first meeting. Once we have everybody, we will have a press conference and we will celebrate this pretty big, because this is a big thing, Topeka. And then the last thing is I am going to start asking all of you to remember, not because it's my birthday in March, but for the past, I don't know how many years now, every March I have asked for people to do an act of kindness. A lot of people like to message me on Facebook and say happy birthday, and what I tell people and I encourage people is to think, don't say happy birthday. Tell me what you did that was great in the community. So just do something kind. Start this month. Let's celebrate the birthday month. And let's start doing kind things in our community. we are only as effective as we're able to impact the lives of others. So keep that in mind. I'm going to ask you, and then for my birthday, I'll report back to you guys how many great things were done in our community in the name of kindness. Councilman Lesser, Councilwoman Hiller.
I do have a few. First, I accepted the invitation, as it turns out, on behalf of all of us, and went to the Metal Luncheon a couple of weeks ago now, right after. Metal is the combined chamber reps from Manhattan, Emporia, Topeka, and Lawrence. And their program that day was to have represent either the presidents of each of our respective universities, or in the case of KU, there was a substitute to talk about how those universities fit in and what their needs were. It was a packed house at the Dillon House, and it was a really excellent, it was great to be there just to see that happening and get to watch it sort of wash around. So I want to let you know how impressed I was with that. Second, yes, I too was at the Cyrus. And for me, when things like that happen, as the mayor mentioned, I mean, I go way back with that and got to spend some time just kind of standing with Mayor Walgast, former Mayor Walgast, who was involved so much. And I don't have to be out front with things like that. What makes me happy is to kind of stand there, sitting in the back, holding up the wall and just watching it flow by, watching the people who were there, watching how the staff was, watching how the developers and development team were, looking at just who was there and pouring through, and it was amazing. So thanks to everybody and kudos to everyone who was involved. A short sad report that I will introduce with kudos to the Ward Meade Neighborhood Improvement Association for being brave and strong and actually filing suit to try and move the dial on saving Sumner Elementary School. The judge's order was issued yesterday and they lost. And that's really sad. It's painful. We did learn a lot. We learned a lot. I mean, I've scanned the decision, so I need to read it again. But in terms of how the judge saw who was a party in interest and who wasn't, based on how they handled that suit. They did get, through the course of that suit, the people from the church did show up and do some roofing and some other work on the building. We're hoping that they didn't, when they cleaned up, cart everything out. It was there. Everything that was historic that had been damaged had been set aside to be saved. We don't know what happened, but there was some safety mothballing that did occur this summer. So when there's the right time, I hope that we all as a community can see if we can figure out what to do to save that building. It's harming the neighborhood. I have people who are very responsible and good rehabbers who caught me, I don't know, only a week or two ago and said they'd looked at a house that was for sale across the street. Decided not to buy it, and I think it's still for sale. It was because of Sumner. It's harming Topeka because it's such an important part of our community. Heritage tourism is something that needs to grow. We are on the U.S. Civil Rights Trail, and we're also a key part of a national application for UNESCO World Heritage Site status. And not having things going in Topeka could be a real game changer for our country. So it is important. Again, kudos to the neighborhood for having the strength and the vision to take that step. On a lighter note, I hope if you don't have the 21st of February from 4 to 6 on your calendar that you mark it. Community First and Faith Temple Church of God in Christ have purchased the Colored Women's Club, the historic Colored Women's Club on Lincoln Street, and they are having a kind of a grand opening for its rehabilitation and announcement on the 21st. They will be in particular focusing on honoring famous and not so famous but very important African American Topekans. The students from the international school there will be doing a reenactment of the Brown v. Board case at kind of closer to the 6 o'clock mark in that event. So we're pretty darn excited and pretty proud of them for that. And last but not least, I went and sat in on the Tennessee Town Neighborhood Association's SORT meeting. And the idea of SORT is that we're reinvesting in key key infrastructure investments in a neighborhood, but also we're looking at improving housing, getting it rehabbed, and incentivizing more developments. And what was announced that night was that, and Sasha's not here, I wish she was, but the combination of the Neighborhood Relations Department, Cornerstone, and Habitat, leveraging money that was set aside as part of the SOAR money to do infill housing, they are going to have either 4 or 5 new infill homes in Tennessee Town neighborhood on 2 sides of Lane Street in the 1100 blocks, possibly a 5th that would be kind of behind one of them, and there's another one that will occur in historic Old Town on the 700 block of Fillmore as well. Of what they're sure of right now, the 2 of them will be for families at 80% of the median, 2 will be for families at 50% of the median, 1 will be families for at 30% of the median. They will all be 3-bedroom new homes in that neighborhood, and they leverage that money with Chodo money, Kansas Human Resources Corporation money, and others, and just kudos to everybody. That's exciting. That's what we wanted. Thank you.
Councilwoman Claire.
Just to echo what's been said about the Cyrus, whoa, that was a fancy place. I like that. The staff was so nice. The food was out of this world. It was delicious. So I'm planning on staying there sometime.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know, but I seen Sandra and I seen Councilwoman Hiller and I seen you and I seen Brendan, Mr. Jensen, and so I don't know. I think you're floating around there, but it does make you feel like you're not in Topeka anymore. But I too will go stay there and just check it out. I heard the mayor say to do something kind, so I want to be the first to jump out there and do something, kindly do something for Mr. Gerber, who has a table as a desk. Can we have staff, city manager, look around and get him a desk and report back to me? That way I can give it. That way I can give it to. You know, those are the kind of things I'm talking about. Look how our staff is working, you know. But so if we could kindly look and find him a desk somewhere and report back so I could be the first one to give it to the mayor. I would like to say that I did go over to District 2, which is part of my district as well, how they cut it up. And it was amazing, the fire hydrant, and Karen was there, and Deputy Mayor was there. Just the painting and just all everything that is on there, the detail and what it represents. And if you haven't had a chance, go over there and check it out. And you have to look at the whole thing. I thought that was rather awesome. And I think Topeka is making some good strides. I think they're doing some good things. And I think people are taking notice. I did have Jim Dykes say he'll be glad when that building's tore down so he can get back to business. He's got all those people standing around in front of a Cat Fed. I did give him a suggestion to hand out maybe a free checking and to everybody out there, or get one of those waving things like the tax people do, but he didn't think that wasn't his style. But haven't heard a lot of complaints, but a lot of people are there's a lot of mumbling, just a lot of what are we doing, how are we doing it, and I think that's what needs to happen. You know, we spend so much time talking about it, but then when we start some moving and shaking, that makes people really, really happy. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to try to do this in about 15 minutes, just for Councilwoman Ortiz. Sorry. So as I announced last time, the Southeast 29th Street project has started out in District 4. And right now they have it shut down from basically a Granger on top of the hill to Wittenberg Road. However, and if you live out there, you know this, but there are 3 long-time businesses right there just on the east side of the bridge that's now out. That's the Dock, the Shack, and Vinewood. And great places to go, great places to patronize, and it's just a little more difficult to get to them, but please make the effort, especially if you live out there. And if you don't live out there, come out anyway. And it's going to be a fantastic project. And I would like to thank the fire department. Because of that bridge being out, they took one of their engines over to the 6th and Rice Road to allow a faster response to Aquarian Acres. So I appreciate you guys doing that, Chief. And I also just have to say I really appreciate, I was at the pre-construction conference for that. Tom Flanagan from the county invited me. And we had representatives from fire, police, our emergency response team, Jim Green, and Jeff. I forget Jeff's last name, but everyone's there, and I really appreciate that. That's a big project. It's going to be a mess for a while, but I really appreciate everyone working together. It's going to be a lot of frustrations over the next few months, but it's going to be great. So, thank you.
Councilman Padilla.
I'm going to ask your indulgence if I could. Just this last Saturday, my godfather passed away. And between him and my father, who is gone, they raised 10 boys. And believe me, that couldn't have been easy. I wouldn't take that challenge on. Both of them, though, served with some distinction in World War II. And as we all know, they are the greatest generation that ever lived. So I just ask for a moment of silence for him and every other veteran who has given for this country.
Councilman Jensen.
Thank you for that. It was very touching. I too got to go to the Cyrus. It was an incredible thing. It's definitely raising the bar in this community. I'm excited to see what springboards off of that. If that's the new standard for Topeka, then oh my gosh, we have some great things coming. Still no sign of that baby. I've been to the bus station every day this week, waiting for the stork to get there, and it is not shown. So I'm unsure where this thing is going to come from, but it's definitely not riding the bus, that's for sure. Having said that, we have cleaned everything and rearranged things. I can't tell you how many times. She's on maternity leave now, and it's getting rough. So this if we could get a mayoral declaration to get this thing here.
We had a mayoral decree last Sunday.
So, but everybody's fine. We're over our due date now, so really any day we should have a junior council member. But we're as ready as we can be, and everybody's very excited. Everybody's healthy so far as we can tell. So that's been my life and going to be for the foreseeable future, I'm told. Anyway, have a great week, everybody.
Beat that one, Councilman Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. Good luck with that, Councilman Jensen. I also want to echo the congratulations to the folks at AIM Strategies on the Cyrus. I wasn't able to be at the party, but I did get a private tour, which was great, and look forward. I've already referred a few people there. I also wanted to just tell everybody I got the opportunity at our last snowstorm to ride in a snowplow, and I wanted to thank the folks at Public Works, Jason and Jackie and everyone else who was willing to answer all my questions that night. I would recommend that you guys do the same if you get an opportunity to. It was an eye-opening experience. And then also I wanted to sort of kind of piggyback on that with these weather events, potholes open back up, and I've been fielding a lot of questions about that. And so just want to remind everyone that there is an app for that, See Click Fix. Report them. If we don't know about them, we can't fix them. So get on See Click Fix. If you don't have the app, go ahead and download it. Thanks.
Councilman Cohen. Okay, we have two individuals signed up for public comment. The first person is Mr. Willard Steinkuhler.
May it please everyone, Mayor, City Council members, City Manager, and all valuable support staff. This is about pet licensing. the history that I would like to present is the fact that individually we had our animal licensed and paid for the next year to have the animal licensed again. Before the first year was up, the animal was euthanized, died, and I had already paid the $8 for the next year. So I had called Pet Data several times, and I know that the city is not with Pet Data anymore, but that was a problem. Pet Data kept answering the phone that it was the Topeka animal licensing, and that was wrong. But what we have now is a situation where Pet Data is no longer included or being used, and Tracy at the police department mentioned that everything's in-house, and Tracy does an excellent job, and she gave me the form, the new form that we have, and in the old form, previously when I spoke to the city council, in the administration and the wisdom, there was a sentence included in the old form which is lacking in the new form. And I'd like to read the old form letter to you. For refunds inquiries regarding pets that have passed, contact the police department, 320, and the same number. And then just below it is Pet Data's number, which is not relevant anymore. And my specific request is simply that this sentence be taken from the old form and added to the new form so that one of the thousands of pet owners in the city of Topeka won't experience the same thing. This is like the third time I've talked to the city council about this, that if their pet dies before the next year and they've already paid for the next year, that they can get a refund. No one wants to license a pet that's already dead. So that's my specific request, that this same sentence be just lifted from one to the other. And I would like to give these forms to the capable and efficient city manager so that he can do whatever necessary to expedite this. And I have just a minute or so left, and I would like to simply say that my goodness, congratulations to the city of Topeka and everyone that was involved in the way in which the street tax went through. It's wonderful. Adult people can make the right decisions, give them a chance, and I was just very, very pleased with that. I think it was like 40,000 more voters approved it than disapproved it. It's wonderful. That's all I have. Thank you for your time and all that you do for the city of Topeka.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Steinkuhler. The next person signed up to speak is Mr. Spencer Duncan.
Good evening. I know, I'll try to... There's a KUK state game on. Trust me, I understand the issues. I am Spencer Duncan. I'm here this evening in my capacity as the president of the Board of Trustees of the Topeka Performing Arts Center. One of the frustrations expressed as we went through the budget process last year was that you only hear from us during the budget process. So I made a pledge this year to come to you several times throughout the year and give you some updates. I figure if I do that 10 times, that's like a 40-minute presentation. See, I will snuck it in little glitches. I found the loophole. We have completed an annual report. When our executive director gets back from his vacation next week, I will make sure each of you get a copy as it's hot off the presses this week, and we will make sure every one of you get a copy of that. We have had meetings with the city, including City Manager Trout. Those, from our perspective, have been positive and accomplished things, and we've created some metrics, and I'm sure when the new finance person gets here, we'll have some conversations with them moving forward. But those conversations have started and have been ongoing. We are appreciative of several projects the city has done. The fixing the steps out front, that is obviously not just a safety issue and the lighting, but it looks a lot nicer. Also, the new HVAC system will be great. I think that we'll see some significant cost savings because right now, if you turn up the heat, you got to turn up for everywhere, and I think this has some zones, which will be very nice for all of us in saving a few dollars. From last year, some of the goals that TPAC had set, and I'll kind of give you where we fell with them. We increased attendance by 7%, surpassing 76,000 visitors. We increased our event days by 21.5% to over 180 events. We increased our Friends of TPAC program by 26%. We now have about 200 folks, which generates about $25,000 in annual revenue. We had a 30% increase in people signing up for just emails. We have about 25,000 people now who we're sending mailings and emails to. We made a very big social media push last year and website push, and that led to about an 83% increase in usage of us putting stuff out in the world, unique visitors, so that worked. At least the metrics tell us that our efforts there have worked significantly. Fundraising, we set a goal of $200,000. On paper, we hit it, but we actually in the bank account only hit $193,000, and that's because a $10,000 donation fell through at the end of the year because they had a financial issue that came up. So it was a win and a loss, but we came very close, so we were very proud at least that we hit those goals. Our largest fundraiser was the Jesus Christ Superstar event, which raised almost $50,000. Although I will also say that our Gingerbread Home for the Holidays event this year raised $30,000, which was one of the biggest gingerbreads in many years. We were happy we landed the National Leap Dance Competition, which came to our facility, brought about 600 dancers to Topeka, and they were so impressed with TPAC, they're coming back. They've locked in a multi-year deal, so they'll be coming back. Through our youth programs, our school-time theater program hosted more than 2,600 Topeka kids last year. Our Shuffle Theater program hosted 1,200 third graders, and our Young Artist Award program provided more than a dozen scholarships to students. And in terms of economic impact, we generated just in ticket sales, not in everything else we did, but about $45,000 in sales tax just through all the tickets that we sold. We put more than about $680,000 back into the community through wages and vendors. We hire almost all local, and so all that money stayed here in Topeka. And we know from the ones we can track that we filled about 1,500 hotel nights last year. So that's a very brief, hey, these are the good things we did last year. I'm always happy to answer questions anytime. Just give me a call and give you updates on what we're doing, and next month when I come back here, I'll try to tell you what we're doing for 2019 and some of our projects that we're working forward. So I'll keep coming until you get sick of me, and even then I'll keep showing up. So I just wanted to say thank you from TPAC for your efforts. While our budget didn't hit exactly where we wanted last year, we've definitely seen an increase, and we can't do that without the support. Obviously, even though I always remind you, you own the building, I also remind you that the financial support you give it allows us to do all of those things we just said here and a lot more. So thank you for that. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your report. Excellent stats. That being said, there is no executive session tonight. There is no further business to be discussed. Enjoy the game. We are adjourned.
Yeah.